What you get when you mix a Roland Jupiter 4 with a vintage Space Echo and a fair bit of digitization and virtualization and some great value for money, and you stick to a planetary theme, you get this, the Cherry Audio Mercury 4. It's an emulation of the vintage Jupiter 4, and we've also got this Space Echo style tape echo and reverb. And this really is nice, as I've not come across a Jupiter 4 emulation before. Roland Cloud's got the Promars, which is like a single voice of the Jupiter 4, but with an additional oscillator. And of course, it's only mono. But there's no direct emulation I'm aware of, and it's a lovely little synth, and it's becoming increasingly rare and more expensive. Here's a couple on reverb at the minute at around 4K, and sticking with the space exploration theme, the prices are definitely shooting into the stratosphere. Well, I think actually it's already got there at 5K, especially considering I sold mine for £100 back in the 90s. But I'm not bitter at all in any way, not in the slightest. Honestly, it really doesn't bother me at all. But why is it so expensive? Well, it's got discrete oscillators. In other words, they're built from individual components, not all squeezed onto an analog chip. So it's more akin to the Jupiter 8 than the Jupiter 6. The Jupiter 8's got discrete components like the Jupiter 4, and that's around 25K now. And the Jupiter 6 uses the SEM chip like quite a lot of other synths. So now that's an absolute bargain at around 5K. The Jupiter 4 has also got the same filter as the SH series of monosynths. So the Jupiter 4 stands on its own as the bridge between the 1970s monosynths and the 1980s polys. It's increasingly rare and expensive, and now we've got an emulation for just $39. Okay, take a look at the front panel. You can see it's obviously an emulation of the Jupiter 4. We've got pretty much identical layout to the front panel. Starting on the left, we've got the ARP rate and this VCF sample and hold. It's called VCF mod on the original. We've got the LFO, which has got a delay, a normal and a wide mode, and 4 different wave shapes. And we've got a single VCO with a sub, and just a sawtooth, a pulse and PWM. And actually on this we've got, on the Mercury, we've got an additional low octave. We've got noise, just on or off, high pass, low pass with resonance, 4 positions for keyboard follow, 2 ADSR envelopes. On the Mercury we've got velocity sensitivity as well. But it all looks much of a muchness, doesn't it? Then on this middle panel here, we've got some extra little bits like the arpeggio, unison and polyassign modes, a chord mode and hold. Then we've got the tape echo and the reverb, and on the bottom left it looks extremely similar to the original hardware. In fact, it looks identical, doesn't it? So let's start digging in and take a look at what each of these sections does, shall we? And before we get into the sound engine, let's just take a look at a few of the functions. If you know your Cherry Audio, these will be very familiar to you. You've got a focus button that you can focus in. Got help, that's online. On this actually we've got oversampling, so you can change the audio quality. I don't think that's on any of the others I've played actually. We've got this keyboard, so you can play it with your keyboard, obviously, with your QWERTY keyboard. MIDI panic, MIDI learn, really super handy. MIDI learn, let's learn the VCF. Push that, click on it, wiggle a knob, there we go. Click on that, wiggle a knob, click on this. Let's just actually do it quick, so make the demo a bit easier. Doing this with my sub 37, so stop learning. In fact, let's do the LFO rate as well. Okay. Got access to the zoom from the menu, plus we've got some settings. And we've got loads and loads and loads of presets. Cool. And that literally is just me clicking on one and going through some. So tons of usable stuff. And another big one is this little drag facility here, so you can make it any size you want really, really super quickly. The only thing I'd say about the GUI actually is that where it says Mercury 4 could be put to the left of Compuphonic, and you could lose all this space because this black bar at the top takes up a lot of unnecessary space. But other than that, yeah, great. Okay then, let's move on to the sound engine and see what all these bits do. We'll start off looking at the VCO, click new, and we'll get a new initial preset. What have we got here? We've got a sawtooth, we've got the Ensemble on, let's take that off. Nothing else being modulated. Don't think so. Okay, we've got sawtooth, we've got square, and then we've got the pulse. So we've actually got 5 positions for the pulse. We've got square and then 4 others. So. And this switch is also used for PWM, the amount of modulation from the LFO. So switch it into modulation mode. We can also turn the oscillator off. I'm clicking the keys now. Nothing, and bring the sub in. So quite easy to get fat tones, even though you've only got a single oscillator. We've also got noise. Let's turn the oscillator off so we can hear it. So it's quite quiet. But not too quiet. Nice to use that on a bass line. I'm just seeing if I can have it sitting in there, giving a little bit of an additional transient, or you really need to be able to lower the volume. Be nice to be able to adjust that actually. But yeah, there's your VCO. Moving over to the next big bit, and that's the VCF. Got a high pass. Low pass, which you just heard. Getting lovely smooth modulation using this this knob on the. I'm getting lovely smooth modulation using this knob on the sub 37 actually. You can hear a bit of step in there. But if we press Command and then move the mouse, we get super fine control. If I try that with the knob, Command and the knob on the sub 37, no, that doesn't work. Anyway, it sounds quite nice, doesn't it? I'll stick it up against the Promars from Roland Cloud actually later, because it is meant to have the same filter in it, I think. It's like a single voice of this, but with an additional VCO. Put this into highest quality. Getting some nice bass rumble, aren't we? How accurate this is, I don't really know. You know, I can't remember. It was 20 years ago I sold mine, so hard to say. But as I say, I'll stick up against the Roland Promars in a minute. And we've got all the usual things you might expect. Modulation via the LFO. I'd expect that to be smoother with it being a sine. Or is it just that it's quite high? Doesn't sound like I'm getting too much difference from the different wave shapes actually. And we'll try that against the Promars in a minute as well then. Envelope modulation, obviously. It's inverted. Let's see if we can do a sort of standard Roland sounding bass line. Yep. Go from really high to really low. If we put the resonance up, so just watch your ears. Let's hear how high that goes. That's a lot, isn't it? Trying to make a bit of a kick. Yeah, quite snappy as well, that envelope, isn't it? 14 milliseconds it says there. If that's what you want to do with it, it can sort of do it. I'd have to double check it against other things, but that's pretty good, isn't it? And then velocity sensitivity as well. As I hit the key, you can see what the velocity is. VCA, not too much to talk about here. We have a velocity sensitive Jupiter 4 or Jupiter 4 style thing. We can modulate that with the LFO as well. Let's just get a normal sound. Not much variation there. Let's put it on oversampling high. I'd expect to get different tones with the different waveforms there, with it being at quite a high rate there. It's sort of audio rate, isn't it? So if we come back to the left hand side, then we've had a little play with the LFO. We've seen that we've got the normal and the wide mode. Normal mode goes from 80 Hertz down to 0.1 Hertz, and wide mode goes from 0.015 to 800. So 0.015 means you can do really lovely long sweeps and things. And when we're on fast rate, it should be a bit like FM actually, because 800 Hertz is quite high, isn't it? Let's modulate the VCO with it. So. Modulating the VCO with it up to 800 Hertz. I'm not getting those FM style sounds I'd thought I'd get, to be honest. Let's put it onto a pulse, normally get much brighter results. Now I found that with the memory mode as well, it doesn't do great FM style sound. Let's try it on the filter at audio rates. That's more the sort of thing I was hoping for on the VCO actually. So it's okay, it's not great at that. We can sync it obviously to the DAW. And if you use the mod wheel button, it won't modulate until I use the mod wheel. That you can't see me using. Because there isn't a mod wheel on this to give any representation. Over to this trigger then, this is the ARP rate. So I'll play the Arpeggiator, I'll play it now. Sync. So that all works. I'm just going to put this back on 1 because my computer was having a little bit of difficulty there, but I imagine most other computers won't. So that's the ARP rate, but it's also the sample and hold rate. It's called VCF mod on the original, but it does the same thing. Let's take sync off. Only goes up to 25 Hertz there. Good enough for your R2-D2 or your 1970s computer. And I think that brings me to the end of the top row and the main bit of the synth engine. So that now brings us to the second row with the Arpeggiator, the assign modes and the effects. So I think we heard drift earlier, did we? Let's just put initial preset back on, take the ensemble off. That's definitely drifting. Let's put it back down a bit. I think that sounds a bit like the one I sold. Ensemble, we've got a chorus on and off. On the original, we don't have this knob. So that's quite nice little addition. And then that brings us to the arpeggio, and the arpeggio is interesting because you'll notice there's no octave switch. Let's put it onto a mono mode, put it on up. And it's just got this ARP top note here. So if we click on top note and we bring it down to this one here, note 72, we now won't go as high, we'll only go as high as note 72. The top note an octave lower. The top note as that G there. And we're not moving above the C. So yeah, interesting way of doing it. So let's put that back up again. So let's go up, down, and random. So it's quite simple, but it's effective. It does give you the feel of using something from the 70s. Then we come over to the detune knob, which works with unison modes 1 and 2. Slightly different modes. Unison 1, we've got the number of voices here, which will change. Let's leave it on 4. So that's working in mono. In unison 2, it spreads the voices depending on the number of keys you got pressed. So if we press 1 key, we get 4 voices because we've got 4 on this knob here. So 4 all on the C, and we'll spread it to the C and the E. I think we've got 2 on each there. I'm not sure how it shares 3 keys between 4 voices, but it is. And then we've got 4 voices as well. And you'll notice we're not getting voice steal in there, it just won't play anymore as I play those higher notes. So let's go back to unison. And obviously if you're playing chords, you want to bring that detune down a bit. Anyway, mono mode. That's last note priority, but you can probably change that somewhere. 2 different poly modes, which are quite nice. I like this. It's got this on the Jupiter 6. Poly mode 1 is what you'd sort of expect. Getting voice steal in there. Let's put 16 voices on, shall we? Cool. Well, this is playing every note to the end of the envelope. So if I play different to poly 2, which if I've released a key, when I press the next one, it stops the previous note. Cool, then we've got chord mode, press it, input a chord. What should we put in? Something, I don't know. The original didn't have a chord mode, but it did have a hold mode. And of course, the original didn't have the tape echo unit as well. I'll look at that at the end. Let's just go over to the bottom left here. So this is the sort of bender allocations or the mod wheel. So if we look at this, we can turn them all off. So VCO, VCF and VCA. If we want the VCO to be modulated by the LFO, I'll use the bender. That's me moving the bender up. Moving it down's not doing anything, but moving it up is. If I put some modulation on to start, no, Moving the bender down doesn't do anything either. I was thinking that it might modulate that down, but it doesn't. It's only positive modulation, and now we'll just bend the note. And it's the same with the VCF, so put the LFO on. Let's try the modulation up. No, it only adds to it. And the VCA. Now this is really nice actually, if you use the bender for this. So the bender's not modulating the VCO, just the amplitude, just the volume of the whole thing. So that's a really expressive way of playing. The portamento, that's working on poly, so mono, and then poly. And this is identical to the Jupiter 4. Whether the modulation ranges are exactly identical, I don't know, but it's identical functionality. So that brings me then to the tape echo and the reverb, which are obviously based on the Roland Space Echo. But here we've got separate access to the reverb and the delay. On the actual Space Echo, the different modes dictate if you've got the reverb on or the delay. So here we've got a choice of reverb. So again, a little addition to the space delay. But let's take a listen first to the echo, shall we? And what I'm going to do, because it's really quite funky, is I'm going to MIDI learn on the repeat in intensity and the volume. So find 3 knobs on the sub 37. 1, 2, 3. So absolutely tons of fun to be had there, and it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I don't think it's up there with my UAD Space Echo emulation, but it's definitely dirty enough for me. That's really nice. Reverb. Let's put it on a plate and put some massive reverb on. So lots of things to play with again. Hall. Really usable that. I don't think it's the best Hall I've ever heard, but very decent. This is the only one I'm not massively keen on. I don't think it sounds much like a spring. It's not boingy enough. It hasn't quite got that sort of tonality I'd expect. I mean, if you asked me which one of these was meant to be the spring, I'd say this one, but I'm not a big fan of spring reverbs on synths anyway. I've got it on the Moog Grandmother and I think it's pretty useless, so I'd be looking at the plate in the Hall every time anyway. So I think that brings me to the end of all its functions. Let's do a little comparison then, shall we, of this and the Promars. Okay, here we've got the Promars. As I said, this is from Roland Cloud. It's meant to be a single voice of a Jupiter 4, and you can see it's very similar. We do have an additional VCO on this here, VCO 2 we can see there with the noise. So it's slightly different, but I think it's got the same architecture on the VCO generally and the same filter. But don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. And you can hear there, I've tried to set them up so the cutoff frequency and the resonance is about the same. One thing I have noticed is with the Promars, when you increase the resonance further, it dips the cutoff frequency. And that's something that my 2600 does from Behringer actually. So if we try it on the Mercury. And this seems to have, or the Promars I should say, seems to have a little bit more of a cleaner sound maybe. Getting some nice fat bass from that. Oh, that really rattles, that one. Hasn't quite got the depth of the Roland Cloud. But let's not forget the Roland Cloud's $150, whereas this one is $40. So you could get nearly 4 of these for what it costs for the Promars. You know, if that funny little thing makes a difference to you. So there are differences there. I'm not sure whether it's the programming on the Mercury 4 or that the Promars is slightly different, but I do think the Promars is meant to be the same. Let's just have a listen to the LFO rates, shall we? Put it on fast, I don't know how fast it is. Doesn't look like we've got the same wide mode, does it, on the Promars? Back to the Mercury. Well, the Mercury's sounding better there, isn't it? That's the Promars. Getting a little bit more modulation from the Promars, but see if we can replicate that on the Promars. I think I'm preferring the Mercury there. It's unfortunate we don't have the wide mode on the Promars. It's a pity we don't have the wide mode on the Promars because the Roland Cloud does really good FM actually. The stuff I've heard on other things have been quite good. It just doesn't sound very good at all. So yeah, another positive there for the Mercury. So my final thoughts on this, well, I do think that the Cherry Audio stuff is amazing value for money. $39 can't be sniffed at. It's, you know, it's the price of a night out, isn't it? And you get a Jupiter 4 emulation. Whether it sounds absolutely identical to the Jupiter 4, I sort of doubt it. I think it probably sounds quite close. They definitely don't sound like they've got generic engines in these Cherry Audio ones. So they are doing something, but maybe not as detailed as other manufacturers. But then again, it's a quarter of the price of some of them, or half the price, or less than half the price. And to me, actually, with a lot of these vintage emulations, it's not about what you can do with the sound. I mean, no one's done a Jupiter 6 yet, and that's because it's absolutely insane what you can do with the sound on a Jupiter 6 with the modulation. I think people haven't done it because it's really difficult to do. But with most of them, you get all these functions on a really basic synth, don't you? It's more about having a bit of fun, playing with an old bit of kit, trying to get some old vintage style tones. And you know it's a vintage style tone because it's limited in what it can do. So I'm a fan of it. If you want to have a little play and pretend you're back in the 70s using a Jupiter 4, this is the one for you. If you ever sold a Jupiter 4 for £100, you might want to get this and have a little weep to yourself. But I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere, and if it was, please think about subscribing and ringing that bell. And also maybe join me over on my Patreon page. It's really useful. Everything helps the channel. And also take a look at my Perfect Circuit audio link below. If you buy something from there, doesn't cost you any more, you get free shipping, and I get a little tip. Again, everything helps. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.